You are listening to the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Pulicki, two high school coaches looking to help others spread their passion for the coaching profession. Tune in for more episodes for anything coaching related in-game, outside of the game, and anything in between. All right, on today's episode, we are joined by Connor Harr, assistant at West Liberty University and member of Rising Coaches. Coach, thank you for joining us. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, John. I'm very excited to be on with you and Todd and excited to talk some hoops.
All right, so we have our opening tip segment. We just kind of want to talk to you about your progression, right? And then how you've been kind of moving up the ranks here. So, maybe if you could tell our listeners about like kind of the steps you've taken to get to where you are now, and kind of what each of those steps involved. And then, how do you decided on that route? Like, what are the, everybody has different circumstances, whether it's school, whether it's, and then, it's kind of a long opening tip, but how would you recommend coaches and, trying to start their profession and where to start?
Yeah. So obviously I started out, not as a player. I'm 5'8", 130 pounds. So probably not exactly the best basketball body in the world. But I started out as a student manager. I would say my manager experience is a lot different than what it would have been at a lot of other schools, where you're going in and, you might be going into like a state university that's probably a Division I school, maybe occasionally a Division II school. But if you go to, a bigger Division I, some of these schools, these high major schools, I know some of like the top Power 5 schools, I've been told like Kentucky and Duke have like a manager for every single one of their players. So you're talking like, anywhere from, 5 to, 15 managers there. I started out at a JUCO called Columbus State in Columbus, Ohio. I'm originally from Youngstown, Ohio, and I don't know if you guys know anything about Youngstown, Ohio, but it's not exactly the most wonderful place in the world.
All football, all the time.
Yes.
Yes. Penguins, right? Penguins?
Yep. Youngstown State Penguins. Yep. That is very true. But yeah, so I moved like 3 days after I graduated high school, I moved to Columbus. I had this idea in my head that, I wanted to start start the basketball coaching profession and try to, kind of get my foot in the door. And, I really wasn't sure how to go about that. And I contacted the head coach at Columbus State, and he said that they had a manager spot that was full. They only had one manager. So I waited until the next year around, contacted him again. And I became a manager there. And, basically all I did the entire time I was there was do laundry and run the scoreboard during practice. Those were the only two things I did. But I think probably what was the most beneficial part to my career was while I was a manager, I started working for a recruiting service based out of Columbus, Ohio called 270 Hoops. And 270 Hoops is ran by a guy named Zach Fleer, who's very popular on Twitter, and knows every college coach within probably about 300 miles of Columbus, just because Columbus is such a hotbed for recruiting and there's a depth of talent at all levels. So that was kind of how I started, was just, going the manager route. But what I found out to be the best experience for me from a basketball perspective was, doing these scouting reports and meeting Zach Fleer, who was a big mentor to me. And he was able to introduce me to a ton of different college coaches. And because of that, I was fortunate enough to, shift into the next part of my career as a student assistant. But I would recommend for anybody that's trying to kind of break into the coaching field, especially young kids that, don't necessarily have a basketball playing background, that, you got to be open to whatever's available. And, that might be, you willing to move, you willing to relocate, whatever the case may be. That's a big part of, you always got to chase opportunity, and it's always better to chase opportunity when you're young. And one of the things I got to add to this is actually a pretty funny story that I was meaning to tell you guys. So when I got to Columbus State, and it was I believe like my first week on the job, It might've been my second week, but it was like really early into the job. And I was talking to one of the assistants that they had there, and he was like, well, so, like, what do you want to do? What are your aspirations? And I was like, I want to coach. And he's like, you want to be like a head coach? And I'm like, yeah, I want to be a head coach. And he's like, in college? And I told him, yeah, I want to be a head coach in college. That's why I'm here. And he told me that day on my very first week that because I never played college basketball, that I would never have a college coaching career. Obviously, to me as a 19-year-old kid, I was like emotionally distraught about that for a while. And I didn't necessarily know, all the people that have been managers, like, the Bruce Pearls, the Steve Proms, the Buzz Williams, all those guys of the world. I didn't really know a whole lot of their background. So to me, I was like, oh God, like, this is terrible. But it's kind of funny how, everything comes full circle. But, I would always say the most important thing to anybody looking to, break into the coaching field is, start out doing whatever you're told, chase the opportunity while you're young, and, come in with a great mindset and try to find some ways to add value, whether that's with your energy, your attitude, whatever it is you're going to do, you got to do it to the best of your abilities.
I think that's great advice. Just be where your feet are. We like to give all of our guests the opportunity to kind of talk about their program, kind of promote their program, promote their players, promote the staff. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about, Western Liberty, the basketball program, and kind of where you guys are at.
Yeah, so West Liberty is a Division II school. We're located right outside of Wheeling, West Virginia, which is a pretty larger scaled city in West Virginia. But we're actually where we're located at, we're right on the border in the tri-state area of Ohio and Pennsylvania. So in my apartment that I'm at right now, which is 10 minutes from the school, if I drive 5 minutes in one direction, I'm in Ohio. And if I drive 15 minutes in the other direction, I'm in Pennsylvania. And, the biggest thing about West Liberty is just, the tremendous amount of success that they've had over the past, 10 to 15 years. They're in the top 5 in NCAA, whether that's Division I, Division II, or I think Division III in winning percentage over the past 10 years. And, it's really just a great program. It's a great winning culture. And, one of the best things about being there is, you're kind of in a little bit of a smaller town, and obviously there's no professional sports teams in West Virginia. And the closest college, like major Division I school, would be West Virginia University, which is about 2 hours away. So, West Liberty basketball is everything. It's everything to all the people. It's everything to all the students. It's everything to, anybody that's around the town. And I think it provides a really unique environment and a really unique experience that you're not going to get from a lot of Division IIs or even mid-major, low-major Division Is for that matter. Where, you might be in a bigger city where there's a lot more stuff to do. There's a lot more stuff going on. There's a lot more sports to get excited about. And I think the biggest thing too, cycling back on our success, has just been our play style. So we average over 100 points a game every single year, which is first in NCAA Division I and Division II. We're usually like top 5, if not first in D2 in field goal percentage, and also top 5, if not first in Division II in assists every single year as a team. So we're definitely known for our offense, and, it's a great thing that, we're able to play fast, but we're not doing it as like a glorified open gym. We're playing great team basketball. And, I think that really sets us apart. And obviously on the defensive side, press 40 minutes. And, the most important thing is I've been really fortunate enough to work under a really great head coach. He doesn't like getting a lot of publicity, but Ben Howlett is his name. He just had a birthday. I think he's 35. He's one of the best young coaches in all of college basketball. He's won over 80% of his games in 5 years as the head coach. Led West Liberty to an Elite Eight this past season, as we lost to the 3-time now defending national champions Northwest Missouri State. But it's just been a blessing to be able to learn from him. And I got an Amber Alert on my phone. I'm sorry. It's just been a blessing to be able to learn from him, and to be able to learn from Coach Lamberti, who's the other assistant that is also, a very young up and coming coach that's 28 years old. So I think the basketball program at West Liberty is really special. And I'm fortunate enough to work under 2 really great guys.
All right. So I want to get into you personally and kind of your content. You have your newsletter is awesome. Your Twitter feed's really good. So I guess how did that come about? Right. Because I think this is always interesting, like what because a lot of people think, oh, I can do it, but then, it doesn't get there. So how did that come about, and what kind of sparked that passion for spreading the game to other coaches?
So, I'm not gonna sit here and say like, and I think most people are like this, especially people my age that, come into this just kind of relatively unknown, where, I think this is a big part of like, personal branding and a networking tool, where, I kind of went in it as like, I was a manager, I was a student assistant, and now I'm trying to figure out, exactly how I can make a name for myself, to, move forward and progress in my career. That's kind of how it all started. And, it just started because I watch a lot of basketball. I watch film. That's what I do. That's my hobby. That's what I do when I come home from practice. And, it was a big, I had all this stuff, I had all these notes, I had all these, stuff clipped out, podcast notes, clinic notes, different sets, all these different things. And I was like, well, I don't really have anything to do with this right now. I'm not a head coach. I don't install my own stuff. So like, why not share it with somebody else? And outside of that, it did turn into definitely me loving to share the game because of the great relationships that I've made with coaches from that. And also, I love to learn. I love to learn new things. I love to hear other people's perspectives. And, by me sharing the game, in turn, I was able to learn a lot more from other coaches that would share the game as well.
Yeah, I will tell our listeners, Connor and I kind of hooked up during COVID with some Zooms and stuff like that. We had some really good conversations on Zooms and things like that. So I guess you kind of led us into the question we're going to ask later, but networking and building a brand. I guess even with the networking part, right? Because if you want to be a coach down the road, even high school now, that's a big part of it. Knowing people, and there's me and John teach, so we know you go put for a high school job, there's 500 applicants, there's all kinds of people, so you have to kind of know people. So how did you go about that process of networking? And then once you started getting your stuff going, how did you kind of build your content and build your brand and kind of form it into where you are today?
Yeah, so I'd say the biggest thing with networking and the best advice that I could give, and I think I always kind of had this in my head, but I was listening to actually a Harvard Business School podcast not that long ago, and it was somebody that wrote a book on networking, and it was just about understanding your strengths and being able to offer somebody something. When you network, a lot of times it can be very, dry. It can be a lot of small talk. It can just be like, maybe one or two phone calls and that's it. Because, it's such a difficult process to navigate, especially when you're young. Because if I go, message a head coach, like, and say like, hey, how you doing? Like, they know that it's not really like it might be intentional, but they know exactly where I'm trying to get at, if you know what I'm saying. So, the biggest thing was, I found myself to, just have a knack for X's and O's and a knack for, different elements of the game. And I used that as kind of, a way to network and be able to offer some stuff up where, now if I'm approaching somebody and I want to, meet somebody, I'll say, hey, coach, whoever at university of whatever, I saw this, I thought it was really good. I thought I might share it with you. Let me know what you think. Something like that. And, one of the other things just about, the branding and, the stuff that I've kind of put out online in my newsletter is, you're attaching your name to it. So you want it to be the best possible newsletter. I don't know, you want to call it episode, but you know what I mean? You want it to be the best post every single time. I want every tweet that I put out to be the best tweet every single time. And if you notice, like, I don't tweet every single day because I feel like when I tweet something out and all these coaches see it that follow me, I want it to be worth value to them. So I don't want to just tweet like, a basic horn set that every team in, college basketball is running. Like there's no point in doing that. It's just me trying to say like, hey, I know what the technical term for this is, but nobody's really benefiting from it because they've already seen it. So the biggest thing for me is just trying to come up with new ways, whether that's, because I've kind of went away from sets. Like I was big doing sets and stuff, and I've kind of went away from sets to more now going into like concepts. And, the biggest thing with that is like, I go to I've been to, a bunch of college practices and stuff and a bunch of high school practices and all this stuff. And, I'll watch teams, just depending on your style, and there's no right or wrong way to play. But I'll watch teams practice their sets for, almost the entire time, or the entire live session. And then the coach will be upset with his team that the sets aren't working, or, they don't know what they're doing after the set. And that's where kind of like the conceptual stuff comes in. And I think is a big tool for a lot of coaches to have, because no matter how good you are, you could be, Matt Painter, who I think is probably one of the best X's and O's coaches in all of college basketball. Your set's not going to work every single time. And you got to be able to know, how to play and where to flow into and how to play without, being dictated what to do at every single point in time in the offensive possession.
I personally, just on a personal note, I actually think that's great. I myself last year in our pandemic season didn't run any sets. And I've definitely gone more to the concepts route because I just think it's easier for kids to understand. There's less thinking involved. So everything you said there was phenomenal for our listeners. So I appreciated that. Before we kind of get into more basketball-y kind of topics, I kind of wanted to talk about rising coaches for a second and kind of take us through, what, your role is within Rising Coaches and kind of what does Rising Coaches, what does the organization do, maybe for listeners that don't know what it does?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't really do anything special for Rising Coaches. I'm just a member with them. They were fortunate. I was fortunate enough to get honored with a, kind of like a service award, but I didn't get the big service award. The big service award was sent out to like 5 people. I got the service award that was sent out to like 200 people. But better still nice. Nothing. Yeah, better than nothing, right? But Rising Coaches has been really cool, and it's been just a great way to build relationships with other coaches. And I've been fortunate enough to build relationships with quite a few coaches, but the 2 that really stick into my head that have really benefited me. And I always say to young coaches and anybody that just, kind of wants advice on this stuff in general, that, it's always better to have, 3 to 5 or 5 to 10 really solid connections of people that you talk to every day, of people with the same kind of mentality and the same people that kind of push you to, think outside the box or think a little bit harder, rather than, just dry texting 200 different coaches every single day, or, just it's better to have those well built up relationships in a smaller quantity. So the 2 that I've built through Rising Coaches has been Menelik Fernandez, who is doing something with Rising Coaches now. I don't know his official title, but he's employed by Rising Coaches now and was the interim head coach at Fleming College in Canada. And Menelik's a great dude. He has a podcast. He has a podcast / YouTube show called Run It Back. And he's been really important in, my development, just me and him kind of bouncing ideas off of each other, going back and forth with each other. And then the other one is there's a site called Basketball MD. And, they put out content kind of sparingly, but it's ran by Matt Dickman, a guy who used to work for the Sioux Falls Skyforce, which was the Miami Heat G League team. I don't know if they're still called that or not. But Matt and me have developed a really good relationship, and it was probably about 5 or 6 guys. Matt, Daniel Dick, who's an assistant at Fresno Pacific at D2, Stu Hartenstein, who is an assistant at Denison, which is a Division III school in Ohio. And, it was just a bunch of guys that got together and, just started talking basketball every single day and started bouncing ideas off of each other of different kind of film projects, different kind of X's and O's stuff that they wanted to put out. And it's been really beneficial in my professional development to be able to meet those guys, not necessarily just because, they might, they never like help me get a job or anything, but it's like they're helping me get better almost every single day. And, being able to have those like-minded people that I have connected with through Rising Coaches has been the biggest benefit to me overall. And, it's not anything, super special. It's just a great way to meet other coaches, meet like-minded people that want to connect. And, obviously it's not going to get you, it's not going to, magically make you, better. You got to, put the work in and see other people and talk to other people. And, you're going to get those kinds of relationships through a platform like that.
So I kind of wanted to now go into, I had kind of listened to you talk about some things with ball screens on a podcast. So we really like, Todd and I really like for our listeners to just kind of target, so maybe for you, what are 2 or 3 of the most important keys to setting and using a good ball screen?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you like 2.5 or 3.5, maybe, just because I feel like the ball screen is such a complex action that it's so hard for me to just, pinpoint, 2 or 3 things. But I would say the biggest one, starting with the screener, is that, your screening angles are extremely important. And by that, I mean that you always want the defense in a ball screen to be chasing over top. So how I usually try to teach it is I tell the screener, imagine like you have a belt on and you're taking your imaginary belt buckle and you're putting it on the defender's outside hip. And by doing that, what it does is it kind of eliminates the ability for the defense to go under. And by eliminating the defense to go under, you're going to have that split 2-on-1 numerical advantage on the ball. And then obviously going to the ball handler too. The biggest thing for the ball handler to me is your setup. I think your setup's everything. Your setup allows you to read the defense, and it allows it allows you to, just really understand what exactly it is you're going to be able to get from it. So, and by setup, I mean, a lot of times when people use ball screens, they'll just come right off of it. And the issue with that is you're not exploring any kind of other options. And Zach Bover, a guy who coaches now at Indiana State, who runs pickandpop.net, which is an extremely popular coaching site, I got this quote from him, and he always said, reject as many as you use. You should reject as many ball screens as you use. And I love the ball screen reject. I preach it all the time. And the biggest reason why I love the ball screen reject is because a lot of times when teams go over, their ball screen defense, their ball screen coverages, whatever, they're not really giving the offense the opportunity to explore the reject or even just let them reject at all. Because all ball screen coverages are based on you using the ball screen. The only one that's not is ice. And then other things too, like I got this from some European coach that a ball screen is a 5-man operation. Like it's not just 2 guys working together. It's all 5 guys in sync at one time. And the 2 biggest things on that to me is second-sided actions. You're not going to create an advantage off a ball screen every single time, just like how you're not going to create an advantage or score an easy bucket on every single one of your sets. So how are you using the other 3 guys that are involved in the ball screen to be able to either keep that advantage or to immediately get into another advantage on the second side of the floor? And then understanding, the biggest thing to me is understanding that the ball screen coverage is an advantage-based action. It's not a scoring action. I don't want my guard. I don't want any guard that I ever coached to ever think when they come off a ball screen, it's like, oh man, it's showtime. I want them to be able to understand the reads. I want them to be able to see that a lot of times moving the basketball out of the ball screen and attacking that tag and getting to that numerical advantage is a lot more valuable than them, just trying to plow all the way through to the rim. But with that being said, as a caveat too, I do always tell them that you have to establish yourself as a threat to score. So those would be probably the biggest tips in the fastest way I possibly could for a ball screen.
All right, so let's flip it to the other side, defending ball screens. I'm a defensive guy. John will tell you I'm an offensive guy, but I've kind of developed my offense based on how I would defend, right? Like I'm like, oh, okay, I would defend this. Well, how is somebody going to get a shot on me or score? So let's talk about defending the ball screen. And then, you don't have to give away all your trade secrets here, but like a coverage that you think is your favorite or very effective for defending a ball screen.
Yeah. So I have I'll give you probably three here and just hit on them really quickly. So the first one that I really like that I've never had the opportunity to install or utilize yet, but I think it's really effective and it's becoming very popular is the Veer Switch, or the peel switch as teams would call it, where it's essentially you're playing drop coverage, but at that point in time, when the ball handler gets to the level of the defender, they then switch where the big then takes the ball handler kind of, depending on where the screen's set, maybe at the 3-point line, maybe at like the 18 to 15 feet range. And then that guard's chasing back on the roller, or he's just staying attached to the screener that pops. So I think that's one of the best ones. And then I also like to switch a lot, especially at lower levels of basketball, just because I feel like there's not a lot of coaches that really know how to properly attack switches. And also I think there's a level when teams don't know how to attack the switch, there's a level of stagnation to that, where I always say, at lower levels and even at the Division II level, it's not like at the Division I level as well. Switching promotes stagnation, where, the ball handler thinks, yeah, I got a mismatch, it's go time. And it just allows all the entire defense to get reset. And, by doing that, I think, if I could switch every ball screen and I could be guaranteed that this guard's going to make either get to the rim and, 7 or 8 dribbles dancing around my big guy, or he's going to take, 2 to 3 dribbles and then contested, 18 to 25 footer. Like I'm totally fine with that. Like that's a huge win for us as a half court defense. And then the other one I would say would just be an aggressive drop. So, I think a lot of teams sometimes drop. It's hard to get your bigs to kind of be kind of aggressive in that, where they really play up and are aggressive enough to where they can kind of take away the ball handler's ability to get downhill. A lot of times they're kind of spread a little bit too far back, which leaves them susceptible to, the guard attacking his outside shoulder or the big popping off that screen. But I think a really aggressive drop is also a really good coverage. But if you notice the kind of the tendency in all three of these is it's that all of them are, they're more or less considered conservative coverages and are required of a shorter tag length than, maybe a hedge, any type of hedge, or a trap, or in some cases even an ice too.
All right, so let's get a little more to that. Drop, right? Obviously I like drop because, we're trying to force people to shoot, at least at the high school level. I don't think there's a lot of kids who work on mid-range jumpers, right? Like it's threes, layups. So you talked about that big for that big. What are some of the keys? Obviously, you're forcing them over, guards getting over the top, forcing them downhill. What are some of that keys for that big to not allow that deep penetration?
I think the biggest thing is I don't know if there's any type of, and I might be kind of naive on this, but I don't think there's any type of really like technical, term that you can put on it. I would say that the biggest thing is that I want my big coming out as close to the level of the screen as possible. And then I want him, kind of sliding with him from there until the guard can get back and recover. But at the same time too, he's got to stay on line with the guy running to the rim. And at the high school level, it's not as big of a deal because I don't know, unless you guys play at really high school levels. I don't go to too many high school games of guys that I recruit and see guys that could just catch lobs off the rim run. But to me, it's the biggest thing is just you need a certain personnel for it. I think like you need a big that can kind of move his feet a little bit. But I would also kind of tell the big to almost kind of, most of the times the guard wants to attack the outside shoulder. I would play him a little bit higher on the outside, on your outside shoulder, to be able to turn him back almost into that roll or that potential pop, if that makes sense.
Yeah, cut down the space for the passer and all that. So all right, let's go to Veer now, which is going to lead me to the next question I have for you. You see it a little bit now in the United States in college ball and some pro ball. WABA does it a little bit. Can you just tell us a little bit about some of the basics of that Veer pick and roll coverage? Because that's going to lead me to the next question about a lot of your content of overseas teams and things like that.
Yeah. So basically, I think that one of the biggest keys to, a veer switch or whatever you want to call it is, I think you want it to make it seem like a drop for as long as possible. And, you want to add that kind of, misconception of, they're not switching this, they're not switching this, they're not switching this. And by that, I'd like to be able to, get the guard maybe going like, 2 or 3 dribbles out off the screen. And then off of that, the biggest thing is to me is that you're susceptible to would be, I think in this case, your backside help would be a big deal, especially because you're leaving yourself susceptible to, the potential role where the big could put the guard kind of on his inside and, you could lob it up to your big from there. So I do think there's a little bit more of a longer tag required in a veer switch. But I think the biggest thing is that you want to make it feel like a drop for as long as possible, if that makes sense.
So my interesting thing, you talked about 2 things. I like peel switch and just regular switching. I actually just threw a quote up that I'm stealing, which was switching promotes stagnation. I'm stealing that. But I actually like the extra element. I'm curious how you feel about it. I like the element of the peel switch where that switcher almost creeps up behind the person that got beat, whether it's on the screen or the drive, creeps up behind the driver and can almost steal that kick out pass because the driver loses them in the vision as they're driving. So I think that's a really interesting element to the peel switch is you can also create some turnovers that you might not be able to in different ball screen coverages.
No, definitely. It's great as well. I think that's awesome.
All right, so let's go like general term EuroLeague, but you when I see a lot of your posts, you do a lot of overseas teams. So I kind of want to get in the who, what, how. First of all, I know coaches are always looking. I'm interested in it. I see some stuff. Kind of how are you watching that content? And then, who are some teams that are good to kind of watch? Because I personally feel like when I watch games, people in the States that maybe haven't watched, they're going to see some players that they've heard of and know on some different teams. And then kind of what are you seeing and what can we, what concepts, I guess, can be brought back and teams can use?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, how I'm watching on EuroLeague TV. It's not like any kind of secret. It's a readily available subscription site online that anybody could pay for. I can't remember how much it costs off the top of my head. I want to say like 20 to 25 bucks a month. But it's essentially just NBA League Pass, a EuroLeague and Euro Cup. For those people that don't know what Euro Cup is, it's kind of like the G League of the EuroLeague. And I might be saying that kind of naively, but the team that wins the Euro Cup gets to move up to the EuroLeague every year. So it's kind of considered to be a little bit lower level, but still extremely high level of basketball. And my favorite team personally that I like to watch is Asvel. They are a French team that plays in the EuroLeague and also plays in LNB, which is the top league in France. Those games, if you want to check those out, those are readily available online. You just got to go to Watch LNB TV or something like that. Just Google that and you'll be able to find it. But the reason why I like them so much is because they're not doing as much this year, but last year specifically, they played really well out of the short roll. And, they attacked the kind of the backside advantage better than, probably any team I saw that year out of the short roll. And, my favorite thing about European basketball is that it's so much more team oriented, I feel like. And some of the actions that I would like, that I like a lot that I've learned from, watching the European game, first would be the reverse angle screen. So anybody that's unfamiliar with that, it's kind of pretty not common now, but it's, the ball handler dragging out a ball screen. The big looks like he's going to, come set it, and he sets it on the short side of the floor. So by setting it on the short side of the floor, it's not really a scoring action for the ball handler as much as it is kind of a playmaking and creation action for whether the big to play out of the short roll or the guard to be able to hit the opposite side of the floor. Now, if you're playing against certain coverages that are a little bit more aggressive, sometimes it can be a little tricky for that guard to hit the opposite side of the floor because, it's a long cross court pass for him to make. But I love anything that's out of the short roll that comes usually from either a step up or a reverse angle screen. And then the other one that I've been really big on recently is, and I'm going to butcher this name so bad, but it's Balabo, which is actually, it's named after a team that is out of Spain. And they were kind of like, I guess they were kind of the first team that ran it, kind of like, the Spain pick and roll, Spanish national team started running that, whatever. But essentially what it is it's oftentimes started with a post entry kind of in the short corner, 15-foot area, and it's just a double post split. So the amount of things that you can do off of that are absolutely just phenomenal, and it leads to such a level of unpredictability. It allows guys to read the defense for multiple post splits. So one of the team that runs that the most last year that I saw was Mornar Bar, who plays in the Euro Cup and also plays in the Adriatic League, which is Adriatic Leagues are available on YouTube as well, full games. And, so going back into like that double post split. So, there's so many different things you can do, whether, it's almost like working off of a stagger where, you can reject the first screen, you can curl the first screen, you could come off that first screen and twist it back for the original screener to come off a double screen. I think the endless amounts of possibilities that come from within that action are just phenomenal. And then probably the last one that I'll hit on really, really quick is just the Veer Screen. And that's kind of popular in the NBA as well, where, you have the big coming up to set the ball screen. He slips it early. I think it's probably best utilized against the drop coverage, which is why it became so popular in the NBA because, drop's very popular. I don't know if it still is. I don't watch a whole lot of NBA, truthfully. But it used to be back when the Bucks had a really good drop defense with Brook Lopez from a statistical standpoint. But now it's the big slips the screen. I kind of went on a tangent. The big slips the screen and he goes to screen away on the opposite side of the floor. A lot of teams run that off of what you would call, kind of a shake pick and roll look, single side pick and roll where he's going towards the single side. I actually like that as well. That's great stuff, especially I think in early offense too. But one of the things that I like the best out of that is going to the two sides. So veering your step up and then making it where your guy can reject that first one. And then you can come off and screen that second guy that's all the way dropped down as the low man and help. And one more that I'll just hit on because I think it's phenomenal and it's not really as big of a European thing is just the get action. So, throw and go, get, whatever you want to call it. I just think it's great because it gives you a tremendous amount of possibilities. And, you could it's almost like the better spaced, less, rule-based to me kind of Princeton type deal because you have so many more options that you can do off of it where, you can get it, you can twist it back in another ball screen on the opposite side of the floor. You could play away, you could chase it over the top and maybe basket cut, or you can chase it over the top. And, if you got a mismatch on a smaller guy, you can post the guy up, just seal him right in the middle of the paint. There's so many different options. If you're being denied, you could, take probably two steps up, like you're going to take it, cut back door. And it also gives you the other option too of playing to the second side with great spacing. So, if he's coming towards that two side and there's nothing there and the big doesn't like anything that's kind of materializing from that throw and go, and you can just boom, right, get back to the guy in the corner or the guy on the wing, the guy on the opposite side. And it allows for, I think, some pretty good flow throughout the course of your offensive possession.
So first of all, listeners, the Balabo action, we just now retweeted on our Twitter account at After the Timeout. So check it out. But, I want to build on that now. And I want to kind of talk to our high school coaches, to our listeners on the show. And you had kind of talked about how you've really started doing some things in your newsletter with concepts and kind of some European concepts. And So now kind of like, let's go into the high school game. I kind of want to take this question two ways. First, if you were a high school coach, what would be some of the core actions you would use? And the second part of it is, what are some things you're noticing in watching some of the high school game that are some of the core actions that current high school coaches are using?
Okay, so when I saw this question that you guys put out to me, it really made me think because I've never actually thought about this before. So I really like that. But to me, I think the biggest thing that I would do as a high school coach is, and I kind of went about this one or two ways. I went about it from more of a conceptual approach of where you'd play 5 out, and you'd have different kinds of automatics based on where the ball's centered on the floor to get you to the next action, or and it would essentially be, we're going 2-man off the ball to 2-man on the ball, and then we're getting to the next side, we're going 2-man off the ball to 2-man on the ball again. So a little bit similar to kind of like, you could say, a little bit of Princeton, a little bit of 5-out, a lot of the stuff that you see nowadays. And then the other one that I would say I would do a lot would be, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but I know you guys had Ryan Pannone on here, who's just absolutely phenomenal. I listen to everything Ryan Pannone whenever I can. But he's done a lot of clinics on the 3-out pick and roll offense, which is kind of an offense that started in, I don't know if it started, but became popular when Pannone was an assistant coach at Jerusalem under a guy named Oded Katish, if I'm not mispronouncing his name. But it's essentially just a pick and roll motion offense where you're seeing the different kinds, and I'm not doing it as much justice, but it's different. It's a continuity where you're going from an empty side ball screen or a drag ball screen with a guy in the dunker spot. And you're taking that from one side to the next empty side. And then that's where you see a lot of like what you kind of see in the NBA now, or even in Europe, where off of that empty side ball screen, you're seeing that guy from the dunker spot shift up to the free throw line, and you swing right into, a step up screen, or if that guy's denied, you can play like a get action with the big and the guard. But it's just kind of continuous motion that's supposed to be, kind of ran at a much faster pace, if that makes sense. But to me, that would be the biggest thing as a high school coach, is I would want to have my guys think the least amount as possible, and just focus on playing fast, being able to read screens. And hopefully if I got guys that are good enough to come off ball screens, I would probably incorporate that as well. If not, it's really simple. Instead of doing a ball screen, the guy would come up to set a ball screen, we'd play a get off of it instead. And that's a big thing in the motion offense that I was talking about, is you dictate who the guys are that can come off of ball screens, and you dictate who the guys are that are get guys or dribble handoff guys, if that makes sense.
No, definitely makes sense. So let's talk about the development of the skills for players with these concepts. You watch a ton of basketball, you watch a ton of diverse basketball. So what do you think are some of the keys for developing our youth basketball? We'll just go up to the college level, because there's a minute percentage that actually makes it to professional basketball. So from the youth level to college basketball, what are some of our keys for developing that type of flow and conceptual basketball that's becoming so much popular? And to be honest, the European players are probably way ahead of us.
Yeah. So I would say the biggest things to me would be, I'm a big fan, especially, when you're working with high school kids, of small-sided games and being able to get guys to kind of play out of stuff 3-on-3, play out of stuff on one side of the floor. And where I would really start, though, is you start out essentially, because you're running these actions and you're running these concepts to give them an advantage, and you want to play out of that advantage. So first you have to define what an advantage is, and the different types of advantages. I will go through, and I'm not going to go through into it too detailed, but we say two on one advantage, closeout advantage, space advantage. And I would say I throw in a mismatch advantage, just if you got to, big on small, small on big, that type of deal, as kind of like the 4 main advantages that you're getting throughout the course of a game. So I would start out with, them getting an advantage. So, they have it, they're playing with it, they're playing through it, and you're playing off of different concepts off of that, reading the third defender in the action. You don't know how many times we have kids that we get that transfer in that don't even understand how to hit the opposite side of the floor and, kind of help the helper scenario on the 2 side. So, starting out with hitting the opposite side of the floor, reading the third defender on the helper. Then we can go into, after we read the third defender on the helper, are you making that one more pass? Are you driving it? Are you shooting it? And then we can go even deeper into detail on that of, when that guy drops down, we could just cut that guy on the 2 side and say, we're cutting the helper, different things of that nature. So you start out giving them space, giving them an advantage, but you can't stay on that for too long, because too many times the biggest mistake when trying to teach kids to play through an advantage, I think personally, is that you're giving the guys an advantage. So they already have it. So in a game, throughout the course of, I don't know how long high school in Ohio, they're 32 minutes. I'm not sure how long they are, if it's all the same. But in the course of a 32-minute game in a high school game, nobody's just going to give you an advantage. I mean, you might get it every now and then, but it's not going to happen immediately. So then it becomes, working in your different actions to be able to create that advantage, and then finding the advantage out of that and understanding where it comes from. But I think the biggest thing to develop is just overall trying to get kids to understand, just understand the basics of basketball, whether that's, reading the screen, knowing to hit the opposite side of the floor, knowing when to cut, knowing, when to make quick decisions. That's one of the biggest things that we struggle with too with high school kids, is they love to just stall the ball. They love to grab it and hold on to it. And it's not how the game's played, even at the high school level, but everything's a lot slower for them at the high school level. But just kind of going off of that, those would be some of the kind of things that I would try to work on with high school kids.
All right. So, and I think you've talked a lot about this, but let's narrow it down a little bit. So where is the game of basketball going, whether it be rules, like in Illinois, me and John always talk about, our coaches, about the shot clock, right? For high school basketball. Oh, I would love it defensively, because I can do all kinds of stuff at the high school level to goof you up in the shot clock, but it would be rules, whether it be maybe here in the States of changing the concepts of development, concepts, things you've seen that maybe you think are coming this way, maybe not at the high school level, but college, NBA, whatever it may be. Where's the game of basketball going here in the next couple?
So one of the biggest things in terms of just basketball in general, the high school level, I think we need to get out of this, and it's kind of a cultural thing that trickles down, is we need to get out of, and we have a very individualistic culture right now, in terms of, what you can do for me and how can you get me better. And a lot of times that gets misconstrued into, our guys being the most skilled guys in the world. They could do all the Euro steps, they could do all the spins, but, they can't read a down screen. So just different things like that in terms of high school, I would love to see, trending differently. But I think it's more of a culture thing than anything. Is, it's just, what can you do? It's a very individualistic culture that we live in right now. And then the biggest thing to me in terms of basketball is, like I said, it's mastering the random. You got to be able to master the random. And that's, playing out of concepts and understanding, that not everything's going to be perfect all the time. And, especially when, you're playing in college, you're playing in the NBA, more often than not, you're going to have a pretty good scout against you. So it's going to be, being able to understand and get better at playing just through concepts. And then the other two things that I think is just playing out of the post. And it's very popular in Europe now. And everyone always says Europe's, 5 steps ahead of, the NBA, and the NBA is 5 steps ahead of college, is creating your offense through the post. And whether, I'm not talking like, you throw it into Shaq and he backs the guy down for 3 dribbles and dunks on him, or, goes for a post fade or a hook shot. It's creating off ball actions out of the post. So like the Balabo action that I talked about. And then also, different things like the grenade action, which is a dribble handoff that comes from kind of like that 15, 18-foot area in the post between a big and a guard. Different things of that nature, opposite side staggers, really looking to kind of attack the low man in a post-up scenario. And then the last thing that I would say is, I think that, and I wouldn't say 2 big guys, but I would say having 2 guys that can execute 2-man on the ball actions as a screener, whether that's popping or rolling, I think is going to become really huge. Because I think, and it goes back to kind of the 3-out pick and roll motion offense that I briefly hit on. I'm not qualified enough to go onto it in extreme depth, but it's going from one side of the floor with one pick and roll to the second side of the floor on another pick and roll. And you might be talking about, whether it's, pick and roll, get, dribble, handoff, you're talking about probably like 3 or 4 or 5 2-man on the ball actions at any given point in time. And because of that, I think there's going to become a need for another guy that can, execute those rather than, just a traditional big guy. And obviously we've kind of moved away from traditional big guys, but it's going to have to be, bigs are going to have to become more skilled and also just, become better screeners in general.
All right, so let's kind of move into our last 2 segments. This one is, we call the 30-second timeout. It's your chance to talk about any subject that you want to discuss. It can be about yourself, your family, your program, a charity, an organization you're involved with. Maybe it has nothing to do with basketball at all. Maybe it's something else you're interested in. Any topic you want, 30 seconds. There's no referee in your huddle, so it's a loose 30. So anything you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
I would just say one of the biggest things that I'm the most passionate about is trying to help young coaches as much as I possibly can. So if you're a young coach, if you want to be a coach, if you're looking for some advice, you're looking for somebody that's been there before, you're looking for somebody just to talk to, just to get anything from it all, I'm always available. And you can find me on Twitter, Harr Connor. It's my last name and my first name, not exactly too hard to find. And I'd love to be able to connect with you, and not just specifically young coaches, but anybody else that wants to connect. I'm more than open. I'm always open, and I'm always looking to hear and understand things from another perspective.
I was gonna give you a little bit more credit there. I think you're not only good for young coaches, but old coaches like me, an old guy like me. We talk a little bit here and there, and for our listeners, Connor is a great resource for all kinds of stuff, basketball and concepts and things like that. All right, we're gonna go into our quick hitters, kind of just random rapid fire questions for you. Could be about basketball. Some of yours are not. So your favorite coach growing up as a kid?
Mike D'Antoni or Chris Mooney?
Oh, Chris Moon. Okay.
There you go.
All right, dream arena to coach in.
Beagley Center, Youngstown State University.
Little hometown flavor there.
Hey, that's my dream job.
Your favorite subject in school?
History or sociology?
All right, he's a guy after my own heart right there. All right, if you could have any pet, what would you have?
I'm a huge dog person.
Any specific kind of dog?
I've had Labrador retrievers all my life, so I'm probably gonna have to go with that.
John, I think we should keep asking this question until we get somebody who wants like a tiger or something like that.
Yeah,
like
exactly. I'm in.
Maybe we're gonna get tiger. Your team growing up in any sport. Now I'm guessing maybe this is Ohio centric, but it could not be. Never know.
Anything Cleveland Cavs, Cleveland Browns, Anything Cleveland. I'm very unbiased when it comes to basketball now, but I still try to watch the Browns on Sundays when I can.
Ely said Cleveland. We got a lot over him in Chicago, so
All right.
at least on the basketball side.
Well, I was going to make a joke about he doesn't like winners, but we'll just keep going from there. All right. So hobby away from the game of basketball.
Need to find one.
Don't we all?
Yeah. Okay. So just at a personal front, your kind of your future goals or projects or stuff you're looking to do.
My immediate goal right now is to hopefully get back to the Elite Eight and maybe not losing the Elite Eight with West Liberty. And, my long-term goal is to be one of the youngest possible NCAA head coaches, regardless of the level.
All right. And I know, again, just to make this joke, because I know Todd likes to say he's a defensive guy, even though he's got a really good offensive mind. What would you say is one of the specialties or something you think you're really strong at in the game?
I would say I'm obviously known as an X's and O's guy from a lot of people, but I'd say one of my specialties that I feel like people just don't see because they're not watching me coach day to day is just being able to communicate with guys and trying to communicate as clearly and concisely as I can. I really take pride in trying to get guys to, come out of the day, come out of the program with a significantly higher basketball IQ from where they started.
Well, Connor, we can't thank you enough for coming on. This is a tremendous episode. For all of our listeners, Connor's a must follow. Whenever he's got something out, it's going to be good. We can't thank you enough. We're appreciative you joined us. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you guys having me on, John and Todd both. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast, hosted by Todd Zazadil and Jon Plicki. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter @AfterTheTimeout or subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. For show inquiries, you can email us at afterthetimeout@gmail.com. You can find all of our previous episodes on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts by searching After the Timeout. We appreciate you listening. Tune in next time for more coaching content in-game, out of the game, and anything in between.